Good afternoon and welcome to the first day of BronyCon. Everyone, Air Brohoof. So my name is Brony and I run the herd census yearly, and I am here to warn you about the dangers of statistics. Sure, it may start, someone asks you on a dare to compute a mean. Before you know it, you're doing regressions because you just don't get that kick anymore. And then you wake up one day in the gutter, you're whoring your body to get that SPSS upgrade you really needed. So do you know the warning signs of statistics addiction? Did you ditch your last girlfriend because her curves didn't follow a normal distribution? When someone says, they'll meet you about 3:30, do you ask for error bars? Save yourself before it's too late. So, I'm here to talk about the just ended 2015 herd census. It closed on August 1st, or August -1 at midnight. If you've been to my presentations before, this is going to be a lot freer and looser because it just closed, and I also run the Brony Thank You Fund, and we have a little presence downstairs we've been trying to organize, and I'm going in for surgery next week, and all sorts of other things. So I haven't had time to do all the gorgeous PowerPointing I normally do for these. So you're going to see a couple of slides, and then we're going to dive right in to literally looking at results I have not seen before, because I have not had a chance to run most of the analysis yet. So we're actually going to be going through in real time and answering a lot of these questions. So that ought to be interesting. And for those of you who love SPSS, you'll get your eye full today. So just out of curiosity, what? I'm on 23. You're a hipster SPS user. So just out of curiosity, how many people here are in the social sciences? Okay. You'll get some of the jokes the other people don't. So if we talk about, again, this is my first incomplete slide. There was some lessons learned this year. We went from using a tool called SurveyMonkey to using SurveyGizmo. SurveyGizmo turned out to be non-optimal for a couple of reasons. One is, very surprisingly, about a third of people tried to take this fairly massive survey on their mobile phone. And a lot of the nice draggy, droppy tools for ordering and things didn't work. In fact, even the pull down for birth date didn't work well on mobile devices until I changed it. So it caused problems. We had a lot of incomplete results, a lot of abandonments right at the beginning because of it. I also learned an important lesson, which is that you could say, please enter your date MMDDYYYY, but Europeans will still ignore that. So I think we got to figure out a better way to do birth date next year. Translations were a real problem this year. One of the reasons we went to SurveyGizmo was because it offers the ability to have the same survey in multiple translations, which SurveyMonkey doesn't. You had to do a separate survey for each language. And what ended up happening is we didn't end up doing the translations, partially because it got delayed, and then things like the list of ponies couldn't get translated in time. But also, it's very difficult to get enough languages translated to make it worthwhile. If you don't do a lot of languages, what you end up is just skewing it to the few countries where it is translated. And one of the interesting things which we saw, which I'll show you when we look at country data, is it didn't really seem to affect the countries except for Russia and China. Other than that, we got just about the same percentages as last year, even though it wasn't translated. So I'm almost thinking that we got a skewed result last year because we had those translations. It was the smallest herd census ever. I think partially because we ran it during the summer and people aren't as around and involved in the summer. We got about 8,600 valid samples completed. Of those, about 5,000 something are also consented into the research study we're doing, meaning that they were over 18 and they consented. Almost everyone who was over 18 consented to the study. But it is lower than we have ever had, so I think that was a lesson learned for us. So we'll start with age. These are a few of the slides I do have. Age was up, I think, about 0.6 of a year this year, so about a little over half a year increase in the mean age. It's still right around 22, 21, 22. I think the mode age is still like 18. So it's, again, still this very sharp distribution where a lot of people on the left-hand side, and then it tails out. I am still 4 sigmas, 4 standard deviations to the right of the curve at 53. I'll be 5 standard deviations when I hit 56. And then I think I have to exclude myself from the survey as an outlier. So, this is, later on we'll have more of the comparisons of how it's separated out, and male versus female and things like that. I can even try to run that today. I can probably give you a difference in mean age, male to female. Gender hasn't shifted much from last year to this year. It's a little more, it's weird, it's a little less male, but it's not more female, because we got some more of the both, neither, and I choose not to answers, which I think are somewhat transgendered folks and somewhat just people who don't like answering questions. But we're down to about 82% male at this point. So it's, as I said, I think in last year's census, at this rate, around season 16, we'll have parity between males and females. So just keep hoping for more seasons and we'll get there. So the transgender question, again, this is almost within 0.01 of where we were, or 0.1 of where we were last year. We continue to have a lot more male to female than female to male transgendered. I think that is pretty much in line with the general TG community. And it's just, it's about 3 times the national average, but as I've said before, I don't think that really represents anything pony so much as geek, because I know in the science fiction community and in the anime community there are large transgender populations too, so I think that's more of a geek nerd thing than anything specifically pony. Marital status, good news, we have more ponies married than ever, and I think, in fact, I know at least 3 people who married people they met through pony. So I think it's actually a positive thing. We need to have like Pony Finder or something for an adult pony friend. Yes, there we go. Well, they already have like a dating site for farmers only. So it'll be another niche-y thing. There's one for sea captains. So we're down to 93% never married. Married is up, I think, about 0.5%. Unfortunately, we do have, with marriages come the other stuff. So we do have a small divorced population of ponies now. The other good news is this number's also up. There are more ponies in relationships than ever. It's up about 2 or 3% from last year. This is a number that unfortunately, as we can, if we have time, we'll look in SPSS to see if it held true this year, but in general, when you look at this, male bronies have less relationships and female bronies have more relationships. I think, again, that's kind of an age and culture function rather than anything specific to us. And that concludes my prepared slides. So now we get to dive into this guy. For those of you who don't know what this is, who recognizes the screen just on site? Yeah. This is your good friend SPSS. Can you actually read these numbers at all? Okay, well, I'll read them out anyway, but this is actually a very high-powered statistical analysis tool. And basically, the farther down this list you go, the more you're getting into really hairy stuff. We're going to be right up here today. So let's look at a couple of frequency distributions here, because that's what we're basically going to be doing. They laughed when I sat down and played. All right, so we got as far as, actually I think I had another slide. I may have a couple more slides, because I know I did some geographic stuff. Yes, I did. I lied. Okay, so I was going to say, because some of these would be hard to do. Okay, so what is your race? This adds up to more than 100% because you can be multiracial. We are still an incredibly white fandom. But again, I think that's not Brony related. You see the same kind of distributions in like anime and things like that. The group that's growing the fastest is Hispanic. If you look, it's up a point from last year. Asian has actually gone down a little bit, and I think that's because we didn't translate into Chinese. Yeah, the only real growth group here is the Hispanic Latino, which is growing. And I think that's somewhat because there's a lot of translation into South America now. Birth country is still about half US. And again, this I think is an indication that the translation didn't matter much because we had about 54% US last year and it's 56 this year. So not having it translated didn't really seem to affect the response curve of who did it. And this is this year versus last year. I didn't get the 2014 label in here. So we're actually down this year in people native US born. UK is up a little bit. Mexico is up a lot, but of a small percentage. So this is pretty much the same countries you see year to year. It tends to be the countries Pony is in. As far as countries that people live in, currently it's again predominantly US, followed by English-speaking countries like the UK, Canada. Interestingly, Mexico's higher than Australia, and I think that's just because Mexico has more people. And then you get down into countries like Poland and Germany, which have again historically always been in this list. So now I think I'm not lying when I say that's the end of my slides. Let's see. Nope. Yep, that's the end of my slides. So let's talk about states for the U.S. because sure we're all mainly U.S. people here. So let's go down to what state do you reside in. Let's just make sure we are sorting it by descending counts. And once again, California leads the list, about 10% of the Brony population. But these are misleading because you need to look at per capita numbers. California has the largest population in the United States, so they're going to lead any list. But I suspect if we go look toward the bottom, obviously Wyoming doesn't have a lot of people because Wyoming doesn't have a lot of people. But I suspect if we go look, we're going to see that our good friend, I think it's Mississippi, always is the lowest per capita Brony population in the US. If we go look at Canada, did anybody have a specific state they were interested in before I go past this? Maryland? First person to find Maryland wins. There it is. 95 Bronies, 1% of the population. So but again, what's Maryland's population? Kansas.
What are the top 5?
What was that?
What are the top 5?
California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Pennsylvania. Which are,
What about Rhode Island?
Rhode Island has 16 Bronies. But again, this is not total population. Yes.
I'm just curious, how many respondents did you get from Mississippi?
19. But they have a much larger population than Delaware, Rhode Island, North Dakota, Vermont, South Dakota, Wyoming. I mean, these are the countries, the states they're beating. These are not per capita numbers.
What about Michigan?
What? Michigan? Who can find? Yeah, 153. So, again, I will have the per capita numbers out once I, depressurize from this. Yes?
You should also divide by fraction of residents in the region.
That's a good point. I'm not sure how skewed it is. I think also that's an interesting issue because the Brony population is almost entirely an internet phenomenon. You don't tend to find a lot of disconnected Bronies. Well, you don't tend to find a lot of internet disconnected Bronies. So It's probably reasonable to do that, and I think the Pew folks have that. For those who are interested in Canadian provinces, we can see the two people who live in the Saskatchewan. Yeah, the Northwest Territories, there is one person who lives there, but it is still, I think, per capita, the largest Brony population. It was like, I think there were 2 people there last year, but no one lives in there, so it's like, you know, they're like 50% of the population because they live there. What? Yeah, Ontario has the largest, but again, they have the largest population. Quebec traditionally has the lowest per capita. Yeah?
How many bronies do we need in order to take over the U.S.?
51% of the electorate.
What's the number in Ontario again?
What?
What's the number for Ontario?
The what?
Ontario number.
164.
All right.
But, you know, again, it's the largest, but, you know, it's, you know, so that was 1.9% of the overall sample. So that's a significant number of people. You know, almost 2% of all bronies live in Ontario. So we could also look at, we have what part of the British Isles, or what is the politically correct term these days for yeah, not surprisingly, it's almost all England. You know, 17 in Northern Ireland. So next on our list of stats, oh yeah, we could look at 5-digit zip codes. That would be a really interesting thing. To make a what? Yeah, I mean, you know, that's kind of the interesting question. How many bronies are there overall? It's a question the press asks me a lot. And, you know, the one time I ever tried to do this, I did a like 1,000-person Google question, you know, survey, and I basically asked them how many, you know, do you self-identify as a brony? And about 3% or 2% of the population said yes of that sample, and then I used the internet using population. I ended up with a number of like 7 to 12 million bronies, which would be great if it were true, but I suspect there's a lot of error in that sample. You know, my gut is that there's probably between 2 and 3 million bronies worldwide, which is a fairly large group of people considering, you know. What's depressing though is when we go to look at countries, you know, some of the most, you know, like India has like 3 bronies in it. You know, it's the most. Okay, so let's look at some household data here. You know, when you go look at this, the most common response is 4 people live in your household, which is mother, you know, which would be for a nuclear family, you know, mother, father, 2 children. And that is the most common one at about 27%, followed by 3, and then by 2. Now 2 is interesting because that would either mean that you've moved out of your, you know, you're old enough to be living on your own, or, you know, you're in a divorced family, or something on that order. You could get more interesting data on that if you go look at a question a couple down here, which is, are both your parents, let's see, or no, this one here. Did your parents experience a divorce? And this is just where it's been every single year, which is only about 30% of bronies have been in a family that experienced divorce, which is an extremely low number compared to the U.S. average. U.S. average is, it's hard to get a good number for this, but it's somewhere between 40 and 50% of households experience a divorce before age 18. So, you know, this again kind of cements the idea of bronies coming from pretty stable families. If you go look, I don't have the data yet for this year, but last year we looked at the median income of the zip codes they lived in, because that's kind of a good proxy for their median income. And it was right around $55,000 at the median, which is much higher than the US median, and almost nobody living in poverty. It was very kind of right skewed on that. So the overall impression you get is people who are in stable households with good incomes and can therefore, not to trivialize it, but afford to be a little bit weird. If you come from a single family household where you're kind of having to take part of the responsibility early in life, or broken households, it's harder you have to kind of be more of the adult in those households. So, the picture he gives of people in stable, healthy, adolescence, early adulthood, who can kind of express their inner pony without feeling like it's risking anything. I mean, you do hear apocryphal, or not apocryphal, anecdotal things about people getting kicked out of their house and things like that, but it's not particularly common. Let's see. Let's look at schools. Are you currently in school? Yes, almost half of Bronies are full-time students. This is not shocking given that the median age is 22 years old. This is people who are kind of college students. And again, when you look at population distribution, you do tend to see like clusters around places like Salt Lake City that have universities, because otherwise Salt Lake City is not a big population hub.
The people that weren't in school, did your survey look at the type of profession they were in?
We don't have type of profession. I should probably add that. One of the questions we do ask, though, is that the people who are in school, this is kind of an interesting question, which is, what is the highest level of education that you seriously, as opposed to, yeah, I want to be a doctor, want to be? And when you look at this, 34% of Bronies anticipate going on to grad school. And another 30%, a third, so 2/3 of Bronies want to graduate college with a 4-year degree or better, and half of those want to go on to graduate school. So, if wishes were horses, so, there are people who won't, but you can look, by the way, for people who are. One of the interesting things you can do is to look at people who have graduated and what they are. And, a third of them have a high school degree because they're in college. A third of them have some college, but or a quarter of them have some college but no degree because they're in college. But 13% have a bachelor's, and you already have 6% have an associate. Have a graduate. And if you were to, in fact, I can do this right now. This is going to be the very dangerous syntax in real time now. And I have to look up a variable name. If you restrict it to people who are 22 and older, so that you look at only at people current age. So if we look at only people whose current age is greater than 22. Temporary, by the way, for those of you who want to know, SPSS means it won't permanently remove those people from the records. I'm trying to do a right click and failing here. You can do it. There you go. Run all. All right, so now if we run that same query, but we do it only for people who are 22 or older. Again, a lot of people are still in college, but a quarter of them have a bachelor's degree, and 11% of them have a postgraduate degree, and that number just goes up. Yep.
Do we have any data on people who do have degrees? Do we have any data on what those degrees are?
No, we don't ask that yet. We could, again. And that's actually a really good suggestion, would be to put in kind of the standard, technical / marketing / whatever.
It's just that I was associated with as an alumnus with the Mississippi State. Yeah, I'm a Brony from Mississippi, and I'm divorced. Anybody want to get the picture taken?
Power to the outliers!
I noticed that there was a really strong tendency for people to be involved in either computer engineering or arts. That was just the two that I saw a tremendous number of.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and please, info@heardcensus.com. Please send suggestions for questions that you'd like, because the more input we get, the better. So people who are currently employed, so about just under 30% are working full-time. Another quarter are full-time students. Unfortunately, 24% of them are not working and not collecting unemployment. So that's a pretty high unemployment rate. And then we have another 20% who are not working under 30 hours a week, and then 2.4% are collecting unemployment. So I don't know how to interpret the not working and not collecting unemployment stat. I wonder if that's people, the way this is worded, we probably need to change it, because there are probably part-time students who are not getting, who are not working. Could be people who live with their parents. I should probably look at only 22 and older again. Actually, let's do that. I can do this again. Let's look at only over 22. There we go. So that's a better number. So 3% are collecting unemployment, 16% are not working with collecting unemployment. So that's about 19% unemployed, which is still high, but I don't know how that compares to the national average. So let's get into some pony stuff before we lose the whole audience here. Enough demographics, let's talk about cool stuff. So why do people like the show? I think this will work, even though it's kind of, okay, there we go. So this is kind of an ordered thing, and actually I should look at the means of these. Why didn't it give me? So this is the various questions about why you like the show. I can do there we go. All right, so if we look at the means for these, the characters, lower is better, because it was basically 1 to whatever, where 1 was your favorite. So character has always been the most important reason people watch the show. And you can see it's a full point. In fact, it's a point, almost a point and a quarter lower than anything else, with then the stories, the art style, and then you get into the music, the voice talent. And what's interesting is things like, inside jokes and nods to the fan, people really don't like them. Or at least they don't consider them very important to the show. So everyone says, oh, people like the show because, they listen to the fans and they put in derpy and things like that. Really, the character is overwhelming why people are watching the show. It's one of the reasons we kind of approached the research we did on trying to find out why people associated with the characters. Now, here's the question everyone's been waiting for. This is when everyone leaves the room. This is like the TLDR. There's been a little movement this year for a certain moon-butted character. She always had, and what's also interesting, so last year the rating was like Twilight, Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, Luna, Rainbow Dash, Rarity, Applejack. So Applejack wasn't in the main 6 last year. This year, Rarity, and I think honestly it's because she hasn't done much in season 5, is off the list, but Moonbutt has moved way up there. Now I will make a caveat. I took the list of characters this year, which was incredibly exhaustive, from the MLP Wiki list of ponies thing. What I forgot is there are characters like Spike who aren't in the list of ponies. So I did add a couple of those back in afterward, but if you really like Chrysalis, she wasn't in the list. But honestly, the top numbers are always like this group. Yeah.
Statistically speaking, who is worse pony?
There's a lot of ones. Are you a Zirconic fan? The Headless Horse got one. The Inquisitor Some of these ponies, some of these things are pretty clearly. I actually have a fraud system I use. Yeah.
Where's bad seed on that list?
Who is what?
Where's bad seed? Bad seed.
Babseed? She's actually, I think, pretty high. Babseed got 6 votes.
What about Diamond Tiara?
Fancy Pants?
Flash Sentry.
Yeah. So yeah, there's Fancy Pants tied Babseed and Flash. Flash got 8. There's some Brad love out there. What's that? Well, as I say, I have a fraud system where I look for things that clearly indicate that people were just randomly going through. And one of them is if you were the only person who voted for a pony, then, I mean, it doesn't disqualify you, it's a point system. Another one is if you're the only person in the country. Like the 2 Antarctic ponies this year, I was able to demonstrate, no, they don't live in Antarctica. Because we also do get your IP and geolocation from Survey Monkey, or Survey Gizmo. So it was actually helpful because there were a couple of places where, like, I was born in Brazil, I lived in Brazil, I was born in Brazil, my IP is Brazil, I live in Batavia. And it's like, look, oh yeah, that's the one down from Brazil, and they just missed it on the pull down. But there are clearly people who you go through and they just are trolling the poll. And when you see that, like, Tom the Rock was voted, for these people, it gets him a point toward the I'm going to look more closely at you. Then they just show up as it doesn't exclude you. It's just, again, a warning sign that I want to look at your record more closely, because I'm not going to hand edit 8,600 responses. Yeah.
Would it be terribly difficult for a researcher who did not know the show to have done this poll and accounted for? Would they have come up with bad data if they hadn't done the show?
There are other what are called attention tests you can put in that, in fact, you'll see one coming up that you can use to determine if people are just plowing through without looking at. One good metric is how long did they take to do it. So, someone who takes 3 minutes to do this is, and again, I mean, if we were doing this for real, serious, like, cancer research style stuff, you throw out anybody who's an outlier on age or anything like that. I mean, we had a person report they were 102. I'm pretty sure they were not. And there were other things in their responses, like, their deity was like, or how did they learn about the show from a pair of rock tablets? It was like, yeah, okay, thank you very much for playing. So if we go look at the ones right below here, which is identification with the characters, are only really useful in the context of, yep.
Did you see a correlation between the popularity of some ponies that had more roles in season 5?
Well, again, I think that's why we see Rarity falling off, because what has Rarity done in season 5?
I think like Mira.
Lyra has actually moved up quite a bit. She's got 2% of the response, and she has never been that high before. So yeah. Hmm? It could be. I mean, it's just we tend to see that ponies that get more action, as it were, show up higher in the polls because, again, but King Sombra. I love that 20 people voted for King Sombra. Christmas. Right. So let's look at how people watch the show.
Did anyone vote for Tom?
Tom wasn't on the list this year. because he's not a pony.
Could be if you wanted to.
Right. Okay, so this is again a lower is better score. This is how you watch the show. Overwhelmingly, most people watch it on YouTube. I'm sure that warms the cockles of Hasbro's hearts. Followed by Streamed by a Fan, the Hub Network, which has actually moved up a bit. Network outside the US, then Vimeo, which is the classless version of YouTube, DVDs, and then iTunes. So the Hub has moved, or sorry, Discovery Family has moved up a bit in the rankings this year, which is probably good news for them. I think more people get Discovery Family than got the Hub. I think the Hub you could get if you lived in like 4 households in Idaho. What else have we got here that we can do? Yep. Hang on a second, my phone is being obnoxious. What was that question? I'm going to talk about them because they don't look particularly good in raw format. I'll talk about that now just to break up the SPSS Fest for a second. So the main thrust of our serious research with Salem State has been, is there a correlation between what characters fans identify with and their personality, which is why you've all been getting these wonderful 100-question instruments. Like this year we used what's called the Big Five with aspects, the BFAS. And the short answer is no. I had been hoping that we would see, especially in the extrovert-introvert and the facets of it, some kind of correlation. There is actually a correlation there with certain characters. Twilight, the ones you would suspect, Twilight, Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, and Fluttershy do have a correlation between how much you identify with them and how much of an introvert you are. But for those of you who know stats, the correlation value is 0.4 and the R squared is 1.6, which means, hang on, let's all rock out, kids. 1.6 means only about 16% of the effect size can be attributed to that, so it's not even a major effect on whether they identify with the character or not. So we have some ideas for next year. I've been plotting with my wife, who's big into archetypes, about maybe looking at the Jungian archetypes, which are things like the hero, the wizard, as a better correlation mechanism for why people like the show. But you know, when you look at it, it's still Twilight is the most identified with, and I think Luna is the most liked to see in the show. We can look that up. Hang on. So this is, let's see, this favorite pony. I just have to get the right cutoff here. This is, I just have to find the right place. Here we go. So it's these guys. This is, who do you like to see in the show? Let's see. No, that's identify. So we're looking over here. These 6 here. So lowest value is Twilight. Oh, Luna doesn't show up in this list anymore because we only needed the main 6. So people like to see Twilight most in the show, followed by, Pinkie Pie, then Twilight, then Rainbow Dash. Then Fluttershy, then Rainbow Dash, Applejack, and Rarity. So Rarity is least liked to see in the show, but
That's not fabulous.
but if you do the same thing for identify with, which is a separate question. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you get Twilight Sparkle is most identified with, which is the same as last year. Then Fluttershy, then Applejack, which is surprising. I think that was a lower value last year. then Pinky, then Rainbow, then, again, people don't identify. I mean, unless you're a fashionista, I don't think you really are going to identify with Rarity a lot. She's kind of she's not, when you think about it, if you think about archetypes, she's not very archetypical, you know, they don't have the archetype of the fashion designer.
The art is My Little Pony, so.
What was that?
Then again, it's My Little Pony, you have to have a really, really character.
Right.
Not really.
All right. So when did you start watching the show? Largest number was during season 2, followed by season 1. So if you look at this, about 40% of the sample size has been watching since season 2. Actually, and if you add between season 2 and in here, it's more than half of the sample is still watching and involved in the fandom, but started before the end of season 2. And if you look during season 5, you know, it's a very small amount that have added in recently, but then again, season 5 hadn't gone that far by the time we did the survey. And during season 4 or between season 4 and 5 is about 15%. So the message here is that there's a lot of people who've stuck with it, but there are still people coming into the fandom. We have the next question. Thank you, Shill, from the audience. Yes, who watched older ponies?
No.
Rainbow Dash always dresses in style.
I lasted 5 minutes on G3.
Right. Well, G3 is kind of like your endurance test. So people who watch G1, 12% of sample had watched G1. 4% of almost 5% of sample had watched G3. Well, actually, it's G. What is Ponytails? It's G2. That's 2. G3. Only 7.4% had watched that. And then, but here's the interesting thing, right? 21% said they watched some older one, but they couldn't figure out which one it was. It was probably like, oh yeah, my sister watched it, and I kind of like, my eyes blurred or something like that. What most directly influenced you? About a little more than a quarter saw it on a message board, about a quarter saw it from a friend. The ever popular other is about a quarter. So, you know, this is very much a viral thing, right? That's the, when nearly half, well, more than half your sample found about it from a friend or a message board, that's kind of the mark of something that's viral. You know, they didn't see it on like, only on the hub. So, have you attended a meetup? This is actually up quite a bit. 36% have now gone to a meetup. We are getting more social, really.
Is there a range for which date the meetups occurred in?
What was that?
Is there like a number of which dates the meetups occurred in?
No, we don't have that date. We try not to totally exhaust our samples. All right, so again, these are better looked at as means. So that's a really useless mean, though. So if you look at this, about 25% or about a quarter would like to are interested in going to a casual meetup. About 20% have already done it. Same for a meetup with strangers. Much more for Brony conventions. And even for people who are going to non-Brony events like an anime convention with friends, people are now, these numbers again up from the last time I looked at them. So people are getting more comfortable out going out socially. So I'm going to skip these for a second, but I am going to go down to some of the new questions we asked this year. I want to see this one though. So female fans should be called Pegasisters. 56% don't give a buck. Another 25% either strongly or slightly disagree, and only 12% agree or strongly disagree. But watch this. Watch this, kids. If we only look at females, I just had to look at the variables for that because I don't remember how it's coded. Gender. What is your gender? All right, so that's 10,008. People do answer both. All right. Anyone hear him, Patrick? There we go. So if we just look at that for females, we get a little different distribution there. Neither agree or disagree goes way down. Strongly disagree or slightly disagree goes up a bit. So 26% strongly disagree. So a quarter strongly disagree is close to 15% of the general population. The basic message here is men say, call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. Women say, we want to be bronies. We don't want to be the women's auxiliary. So, all right, so we got a couple more juicy ones here, and then I'm going to leave a little time for questions. So here's the last really interesting questions, which is I asked questions about the future of the show. So if you ask people, the quality of the show has held up well over time. 60% strongly agree, and another 26% slightly agree. Only about 5% disagree with that statement at all. If you ask, you say, I hope the show never ends, again, you get over 58%, almost 60% agree or strongly disagree. Slightly higher numbers here, so about 20% say that the show should probably end at some point. It would be better to end with the show going out strong, to have a decline in quality, so this is the jump to start question. Again, now you get 75% agree that it should go out strong rather than just limp along forever. 66% strongly are looking forward to the movie, with another 18% slightly agreeing. And over 50%, 57% would like to see a show spun off from the show. So Equestria Goals, the series, there you go, there's your CMC, all right, fine, CMC forever, you know. Absolutely. Lyra sits on chairs. All right, so let's look at the other fandom question pretty quickly. Oh wait, there is this fun question. Are you a furry? Is up again a little bit, but it's still only 21% of the fandom. And if you ask people if they cosplay, which is the next question, 65% have never cosplayed, and another 19% only did it because, like, you know, it was a dare, and once or twice. They only did it to be cool because all the cool kids cosplay. And then let's just look at the various fandoms.
I got a question about something with that.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of thing that would distinguish between people who have cosplayed as like show related or cosplayed as something completely different?
No, we just asked if they cosplayed at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, if they have cosplayed as just like furry. I mean, we could do a correlation of furriness with cosplaying, and I suspect the number is very high. In fact, I'm not in the furry community, but can you like be in the furry community and not cosplay?
Yeah.
Okay, live and learn.
I have some numbers for you actually
Yeah.
about between 20 and 25% of Bronies actually have like a fursuit. So, it's
Yeah.
common, but it's not everyone.
All right, so 13% of fans are into Star Trek, 21% are into Star Wars. That's the one that's got Spock in it, right? Right. 33% are into some kind of science fiction fantasy in general. 17% are into comic books. 41% are into anime. Does that shock anyone in this room? No. 4.3% are into SCA, Civil War, and actors. I expect it's all SCA. I'd love, however, to meet a Brony Civil Wars person. 3.8 do LARP, and 25 do Doctor Who, and 28 do video gaming. So I think that actually, just do a quick check. I think that's probably the end of the interesting questions. But let's see. Oh yeah, here's the last interesting one. So this is your parents' religion. I just have to find where it ends because then there's what's yours. Here we go. I'm not going to do the interesting. We got really interesting others for this. Not so much for this as for the what's yours. I specifically said in it, look, unless you really have accepted the Celestia as your personal savior, don't say Celestia. Or the spaghetti monster or whatever. And
The worship Discord in my household.
unless his pasta goodness has actually touched you. No. All right. So for parents, this is a check more than one because you can have a mixed marriage. I think Catholic was actually number one at 30%, followed by Baptist, Protestant, Methodist, Lutheran. Lutheran's more. Christian other. Not a lot of Presbyterians. I'm just trying to find the meaty ones here. 3.6% were raised by Mormons, which actually, when you look at the Salt Lake numbers, isn't surprising. There are really weird, and I'm just going to go weird, just obscure religions. I took this from the census thing, and there's just like Church of the Brethren I've never heard of. So, then again, I'm Jewish, so. Once you get outside that basic Christ, yes, no thing, like all the little individual ones kind of seem a little nitpicky to Jews, but okay. 2.1% for Buddhist. I'm looking for Muslim. Oh, there we go. It's low, it's 1%. So now when we go and ask the question of what you are, and this is when we got the wacky answers. Jewish was about the population number. It was actually, sorry, I take it back, it's about 4%, I believe. So it's actually higher than the population number. Ponies are the chosen people. Okay, here's your primary. Way up. Let's see. Here we go. So Catholic is about, so a lot of people, I want to do at some point a cross table of what you were to what you are, what your parents were. So 11% Catholic, 2.5% Baptist, 1.4% Protestant, some Methodists, some Lutherans, Christian fill in the blanks, 2.4% Mormon. I'm looking for any high numbers in here. Oh, you're going to love atheist. Nobody was a Church of the Brethren. Non-denominational, Church of Christ, Reformed, Apostolic, Quakers. We have like 0.1% Quakers. Four squares. I have a okay, very Jewish, about 0.5%, which is just about the population number. Muslim is 0.7%. Buddhist is 1.1%. Hindu 0.1%. Native American 0.1%. Sikh is about 4.4%, which is interesting. Pagan is 1.1%. Atheist is 21.5%. And agnostic is 17%. So you add those two together, and we are the Richard Dawkins fan club. At about 38% non-believers. That kind of concludes that. We've got about 4 minutes, so if there's any, well, I just tell you that we are going to try to go for January next year, and we're going to probably have a different kind of psychological measure in there, looking at something more interesting. If anybody wants 29,000 now, big fives associated with all this demographic data, talk to me, because we're not going to be using it for much of anything. And so if you're doing big five related stuff, we have some interesting data for you in a non-psych student data set. So any questions before we wrap up? Yeah. I don't know. We want to find something, again, probably more like, yeah. That might be, yeah.
We all have these toggles on our
Right.
hashtags that I've never seen any other convention, whether you want to move off of actually talk to us.
Right, that's an interesting one, but I'd have to think about it, and also, again, I would only do that, I think, if we could get another sample that was from a more general fan group, because otherwise against the general public, you see a lot of stuff like this at anime or science fiction conventions too. You may not have seen these badges, but it's a lot of the same personality types, so it's an interesting one though. Yeah.
I came in a couple minutes late, so you probably covered this, but can you quickly go back and skim over the gender and sexuality demographics?
81% male, 2.4% transgendered female to male. Oh, I didn't give you that in one number. Thank you very much. Our favorite Brony Fox News accusation. Hey, I just have to find it. I did ask that this year, didn't I? Hang on a second. The easiest way to find it is to go here. Yeah, transgendered. First one, to identify comfortable, transgender. First person to find sexual orientation here wins. I wonder if we can do this. Oh, there it is. It is. It's the well-named Ver84. And we'll probably have to end on this because it's 129. What was that close to? That was right after LARP and stuff, okay? There we go. And how would you characterize your sexual identity? There we go. So 54% or 56% exclusively heterosexual. Another 19% mainly, so that's, all right, who can do math fast here? 75% mainly or exclusively heterosexual, 12% bisexual, 7.7% not looking, and then when you look at mainly or exclusively homosexual is about 4%. And what's interesting, we can do a crosstab here. Oh, I'm being told that's it. Okay. I will tell you that if you do a crosstab against gender, the numbers change dramatically. Thank you for coming, guys.